Genetics is forbidden knowledge to humans. It is the domain of gods. To master the mystery of genes would be tantamount to mastering the power of gods. Mandelstedt. In the library of Central C University, a slightly pale-looking Lin Feng was perusing a book on genetics biology in his arms. Almost every book on genetics biology had this famous quote at the beginning. It was the quote of Professor Mandelstedt, distinguished scholar and the founder of genetics biology. This was the famous genetic Marshall theory. According to Professor Mandelstedt's genetic Marshall theory, the human body was an infinite treasure that contained infinite power. However, for some reason, these powers were all confined. There were invisible locks in human genes that confined all the power in the genes. Only by breaking the genetic lock could humans possess superhuman strength. Genes can mutate. Martial arts experts can even break the genetic lock and restructure their genes to become inhumanly powerful. But is all of it built upon the premise of powerful basic genes? Lin Feng frowned. He flipped through the pages quickly, as if he's searching for something. However, after flipping through many books on genetics, he closed the book in disappointment. He shook his head and muttered softly, as expected, there's still no solution. The genetic Marshall theory emphasizes on strong basic genes. Only then can one practice martial arts to break the genetic lock to restructure the genes. Is there really no way to break the genetic lock in a short period of time? Cough. Lin Feng started coughing violently. If anyone heard his words, they would definitely think that Lin Feng was being too impetuous. Experts who could break the genetic lock were incredibly rare. Every expert who broke the genetic lock had a status of high esteem. They were the mainstay of human society. Being able to break the genetic lock in a lifetime was already worth celebrating, let alone breaking it in a short period of time. However, Lin Feng's anxiety did not stem from impetuousness. There was a reason behind it. Lin Feng had been suffering from a strange disease since he was young, called atypical organ failure. This was no ordinary organ failure. It could even be considered an extremely rare and bizarre illness. This strange illness did not have an immediate onset, but would flare up over time, causing all the organs in the body to slowly fail, and eventually result in death. According to the doctor's prognosis, Lin Feng could only live to the age of 23 at most. Lin Feng was 20 this year, which meant that he only had 3 years left to live. This strange disease was congenital. Lin Feng's genes had undergone some sort of mutation, resulting in this strange disease. Hence, ordinary medical treatment was useless. Only through fundamental genetic restructuring could Lin Feng's strange illness be cured. Although genetic restructuring could cure Lin Feng's strange illness, with the current level of technology, it was impossible to achieve genetic restructuring, let alone treatment. There was only one way, and that was to practice martial arts and break the genetic lock. As long as one could break the genetic lock, their genes could be restructured. Then, Lin Feng would recover from his strange illness without treatment, and he could even obtain great power. Although this world was technologically advanced, humans knew very little about the entire world. The domain of humans only occupied about 10% of the entire world. As for the other 90%, that was the domain of the dire beasts in the outland. Humans could only enjoy a peaceful life by relying on technology and powerful martial artists. Therefore, martial artists had a very high status in society, especially those who broke the genetic lock and became inhuman martial experts. They were the guardians of the entire human society. They were exalted and revered by countless people. However, those who were able to break the genetic lock and become inhuman experts were truly one in thousands. In fact, an inhuman expert who could break the genetic lock might emerge out of 100,000, or even 1,000,000 people. Lin Feng had been suffering from the strange disease since he was young. His innate genes were already very weak. Forget breaking the genetic lock, he was even weaker than an ordinary person. How could he possibly break the genetic lock by practicing martial arts every once in a while? Lin Feng would come to the library of Central Sea University in an attempt to find a shortcut that could break the gene lock from the books. However, in this world, what shortcut could break the genetic lock apart from being extremely talented in martial arts? Although Lin Feng was very disappointed, he continued searching through any books on genetics in the library. He would not give up even if there was only a theoretical glimmer of hope. Lin Feng found another thick book. It looked more like a popular science book on genetics. There must be at least dozens of such books in the library, if not 100. Moreover, there were some whimsical views in it that even Lin Feng could not help but shake his head at. How could this be a popular science book? It wasn't any different from unreliable works by cranks. He did not know why such a book would appear in the library of Central Sea University. Lin Feng flipped through a few more pages, but he did not find any useful clues. He closed the book and was about to place it on the bookshelf when he saw a metal ball the size of a baby's fist behind the bookshelf. Lin Feng took the metal ball off the bookshelf. The metal ball seemed to be hollow and was not heavy. It felt slightly cold to the touch. Who placed a metal ball on the bookshelf? Lin Feng looked at it. He had never seen this kind of metal ball before, and it did not look like a child's toy. There's no knowing who had placed the metal ball on the bookshelf. A long time must have passed, since it was covered in dust. The exterior of the metal ball was very smooth, with only a fissure in a ring in the middle, as if it could be pried open. Lin Feng used both hands to gently pry it open. Snap! There was a strange sound. Incredibly, the metal ball emitted a trace of white light. Subsequently, the metal ball underwent a shocking transformation, gradually turning into a pool of silvery white liquid metal. Moreover, the liquid metal that the metal ball had turned into covered Lin Feng's palm in an instant. Shocked, he hurriedly flung his hand outwards, but he could not shake it off no matter what. An intense pain shot up in Lin Feng's palm. Then, the liquid metal actually burrowed into a wound on his palm. Lin Feng felt a burning pain all over his body and broke out in a cold sweat. He was leaning against the bookshelf with his entire body. The round-faced girl who was selecting books on the bookshelf noticed Lin Feng was behaving abnormally. She hurried over to support Lin Feng and asked softly, "Are you all right?" Lin Feng's consciousness seemed to have gone blank. He did not know how much time had passed. His entire body was burning with pain, and he felt weak and sore. It took him a while to recover. "I'm fine. Thank you." Lin Feng felt a little better. After thanking the round-faced girl, he hurriedly left the library. Although he did not know what the metal ball was, the metal ball entering his body in such a strange way wasn't necessarily a good thing. He had to figure it out as soon as possible. Lin Feng did not live in the school dormitory. Instead, he rented an apartment outside the school, where he lived alone. He hurriedly returned to the apartment and extended his palm. There was a very small wound in the center of his palm. Although there was no more intense pain in his body, Lin Feng could vaguely sense that there was something else in his body. Thus, he whispered, almost instinctively, "Come out." A miraculous scene appeared. As soon as Lin Feng finished speaking, the metal ball that Lin Feng had seen earlier appeared in his palm. Lin Feng felt very strange. When the metal ball appeared in his palm, it felt as if he was connected to the metal ball by blood. Then, with a thought from Lin Feng, the metal ball started to change shape. It turned into a phone, then into a watch that was worn on Lin Feng's wrist. This metal ball could change shape according to Lin Feng's will. However, this was not the true use of the metal ball. Lin Feng took a deep breath, looked at his wristwatch, and said in a low voice, "Activate." Genetic fusion device activated. Buzz. As Lin Feng's wristwatch vibrated, a beam of white light appeared in front of him, quickly forming a hologram in the air. Physique, 0.92. Strength, 0.81. Agility, 0.78. Skill, basic fist technique proficient, can be improved to adept through continuous practice. Genetic fusion, none. Genetic capacity, none. Such a strange set of data appeared on the hologram. Strangely enough, Lin Feng only needed to focus to understand every single data. For example, physique, strength, and agility referred to Lin Feng's current physical condition. However, to intuit from the data, the value for a normal adult was 1. Hence, based on the data alone, Lin Feng's current physical condition could hardly be considered healthy. This was consistent with reality. After all, Lin Feng's organs had been failing all along, and his physical condition was naturally far worse than that of an ordinary person. As for skills, this seemed to only include some martial arts techniques. Currently, Lin Feng only grasped basic fist techniques, which he had practiced when he was young in hopes of breaking the genetic lock as a cure to his strange illnesses. The most crucial things were genetic fusion and genetic capacity. These two were the critical points. Genetic fusion meant that genes could be fused. This was also the function of the metal ball. It could actually fuse the genes of other organisms. Genetic capacity was also very simple. It referred to the number of genes that Lin Feng's body could currently accommodate. Such common knowledge appeared naturally in Lin Feng's mind through the genetic fusion device, as if he had known it all along. Lin Feng took a deep breath. He kept calming his emotions. This was too sudden, but he could still maintain his composure. The most important function of the genetic fusion device was to fuse the genes of any other organism into one's body, and allow one to possess those fused genetic abilities. This seemed like something that would only appear in some fanciful and unrealistic science fiction novels, but it actually appeared in front of Lin Feng. Currently, the scientific and technological research on genes was very limited. For example, fusing and restructuring genes were possible, but none of the experiments were successful. They only existed in theory. This genetic fusion device must be a divine artifact that exceeded the current world's scope of technology. Fusing the genes of other organisms was the dream of modern technology. It also allowed Lin Feng to see a glimmer of hope. If his genes became stronger, would he have a chance to break the genetic lock and cure his strange illness? However, Lin Feng didn't lose his head with joy and remained calm throughout. He began to carefully study the various functions of the genetic fusion device. After a few hours of research, Lin Feng came to a few conclusions. Firstly, genetic fusion could not fuse the genes of the same species. For example, Lin Feng was human, so he could not fuse the genes of other people, because in essence, they were all human genes. Secondly, genes could not fuse with plant genes. Thirdly, the fused genes could not be too powerful. If they exceeded the host's genes, it would cause the genes to take over. Lin Feng would become a monster, or his genes would collapse. In other words, Lin Feng could only fuse with genes of other species that were weaker than his own genes. Of course, the strength of the genes was determined by the genetic fusion device. After fulfilling these few requirements, Lin Feng could fuse with the genes of other organism at any time and improve his innate genetic condition. However, there were risks involved. Furthermore, Lin Feng was not confident that the genetic fusion device would be so miraculous. Lin Feng thought for a long time. He only had 3 years left to live. Currently, no treatment methods could cure his strange illness. Hence, perhaps the genetic fusion device was an opportunity. Even if there was danger, he had to give it a try. So, which organism's genes should he fuse with first? Lin Feng thought for a while. Then, he immediately opened the fridge and took out a piece of frozen wild bovine meat. The wild bovines were originally a type of outland dire beasts that were extremely strong, but had rather low intelligence. They were eventually tamed by humans and could even be reared in captivity. The meat was fresh, tender, and delicious, and had rich nutritional value. Lin Feng also enjoyed eating it, so there was always wild bovine meat in his fridge. No matter what, the wild bovine was still a dire beast. Although it was the most ordinary of dire beasts, if its genes were fused into him, just its strength would allow Lin Feng to improve by a large margin. Hence, Lin Feng said in a low voice, "Extract wild bovine genes." Successfully extracted wild bovine genes. It can be fused with human genes. Do you want to fuse with it immediately? Lin Feng hesitated for a moment, but he quickly gritted his teeth and said, "Fuse. Begin fusion with wild bovine genes. Duration, 1 minute." Boom! As the genetic fusion device began to integrate with the wild bovine gene, Lin Feng felt his entire body tremble violently. It was as if he had been sent flying by a heavy truck before being crushed on the ground. He felt as if he could hear the blood running through his blood vessels. It was as if a pitch-black, incomparably strong wild bovine was speeding through the wilderness in his memory. Although the fusion process only lasted for a minute, Lin Feng felt as if a lifetime had passed, and it was extremely long. When he woke up, he realized that there didn't appear to be any changes to his body. No, there were still changes. On the surface, he was unchanged, but within his body, in the depths of his bloodline, Lin Feng felt as if he had transformed into a wild bovine, running with wild abandon through the wilderness. The genetic fusion wouldn't really turn me into a wild bovine, would it? Lin Feng chuckled self-deprecatingly. The wild bovine genes were only fused with his genes, and Lin Feng's genes were still the main basic genes. Hence, if everything went smoothly, it should be impossible for him to really become a wild bovine. Since the genetic fusion was complete, Lin Feng opened the hologram again to check his physical attributes. Physique, 1.66. Strength, 1.54. Agility, 1.34. Skill, basic fist technique proficient, can be improved to adept through continuous practice. Genetic fusion, wild bovine genes 10% fusion level, genes are still developing rapidly, please take note to maintain nutritional intake. Genetic capacity, 6%. After seeing his various attributes, even Lin Feng, who had always had a calm personality, could not help but feel excited. No wonder he felt as if waves of power were continuously gushing out from deep within his body. It turned out that all of this was not an illusion, but reality. After he fused the wild bovine genes through the genetic fusion device, his physique, strength, and agility had almost all improved comprehensively. Moreover, the wild bovine genes had not fully fused into Lin Feng's genes yet. Hence, as the wild bovine genes continued to fuse, Lin Feng's various physical attributes would continue to increase. Of course, it was not without side effects. Lin Feng quickly felt hungry, extremely so. That feeling of hunger was really quite unbearable. He might be able to eat an entire horse if it was placed in front of him. This was the result of genetic fusion. As genes had to develop, Lin Feng's attributes did not increase out of nowhere. This required a large amount of nutritions. Hence, Lin Feng took out and consumed everything in the fridge. This was not enough. He took out a few bottles of high-grade white nutrient solution. This was a high-grade item. The nutritional content in a small bottle of nutrient solution was equivalent to a lot of highly nutritional food. Ordinary people would not be able to afford it. Lin Feng had been sickly since he was young, and he might lack appetite due to organ failure, so his family had always prepared these high-grade nutrient solutions for him. These nutrient solutions could be consumed or injected directly. Lin Feng injected all 3 bottles of nutritional solution into his body. The effects of the injection would definitely be faster than consuming them directly. As expected, with the injection of the 3 bottles of high-grade nutrient solution, the hunger he was feeling seemed to have declined a great deal. His entire body felt warm, as if it was soaked in a hot spring. Every cell was cheering, and it was very comfortable. Hence, Lin Feng unconsciously immersed himself in this warm feeling and fell into a deep sleep on the bed. In his sleep, Lin Feng felt as if he had turned into a wild bovine. He continued to run through the wilderness, following the vast herd of wild bovines. Wherever he went, all dire beasts would retreat. A single wild bovine wasn't much, but if 10,000 or 100,000 of them were gathered together, they would be an unparalleled force. However, on a certain day, a few human experts walked through the air and arrived. With a light swing of the blade from one of the men, an enormous blade instantly seemed to appear between the heavens and the earth, splitting mountain peaks apart while the earth rumbled. The blade aura ravaged the lands as it completely annihilated the wild bovine herd. Swoosh! Lin Feng jolted awake from his sleep. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead. A dream, or was it a memory left behind by the wild bovine genes? Lin Feng mumbled softly. That dream just now was too realistic. It was so realistic that even after he woke up, he still remembered it. Perhaps it was not a dream at all, but a real memory. The fusion of the wild bovine gene contained the memories of some wild bovines. Perhaps this wild bovine had been killed by the powerful human stepping through the air in the memory. Walking in the air, and with such a massive blade aura. Was he an inhuman expert who broke the genetic lock? Lin Feng felt a surge of emotions. He had heard about the legends of the experts who had broken the genetic lock since he was young. It was rumored that they possessed extraordinary powers and had reached an inhuman level. They could walk in the air, split apart mountains, and break the earth with their tread. They were omnipotent beings who could travel the skies and the seas. In the outland, they killed gargantuan dire beasts that were larger than entire buildings to protect humanity and allow it to live in peace. However, very few ordinary people could see the inhuman experts fight. Inhuman experts were not allowed to fight in the city. Lin Feng could vaguely see the reason from the memory just now. The destructive power of those inhuman experts was just too great. If they fought in the city, the inhuman experts could easily demolish the entire city. Lin Feng looked at his wrist. The watch that the genetic fusion device had transformed into was still on his wrist. After a night of sleep, he felt full of energy. It was a world of difference from his previous sickly appearance. I wonder if the genetic fusion was successful. Lin Feng immediately opened his attributes panel to check on his physical condition. Physique, 4.36. Strength, 4.12. Agility, 3.34. Skill, basic fist technique proficient, can be improved to adept through continuous practice. Genetic fusion, wild bovine genes 35% fusion level, genes are still developing rapidly, please take note to maintain nutritional intake. Genetic capacity, 6%. Lin Feng's eyes widened. His physical fitness had practically improved by leaps and bounds. His physique and strength had reached 4 times that of an ordinary person. His agility was slightly weaker, but it had also reached 3 times that of an ordinary person. This was only the transformation from a single night. Moreover, the genetic fusion rate appeared to be only at 35%. In other words, his genes were still developing, and his attributes could continue to increase. Lin Feng clenched his hands. He felt as if he had limitless strength, and there appeared to be energy flowing into his body at every moment. This was the sense of maladjustment brought about by the rapid improvement of his physical fitness. Lin Feng still needed some time to slowly adapt to the changes in his body. I wonder if the fusion of the wild bovine genes can cure my strange illness. His strange illness was what worried Lin Feng the most. However, there was no professional equipment here, and he could not check his condition. Lin Feng studied the genetic fusion device for a while longer. This genetic fusion device had clearly exceeded the scope of modern technology. No matter who had placed it on the bookshelf, since Lin Feng had obtained it, it was his. Hence, he could not casually expose it. With a thought from Lin Feng, the genetic fusion device in his hand disappeared instantly and merged into his body. It would reappear when needed. Rumble. Lin Feng's stomach protested again. He felt hungry again, but there was no more nutrient solution in his rented apartment. He could only eat to fill his stomach. After all, his wild bovine genes were still developing rapidly and required a lot of nutrients. Fortunately, it was already noon, and the school cafeteria was open. Hence, Lin Feng got up and left the rented apartment, walking towards the school cafeteria. The cafeteria of Central Sea University was huge, and many students were already gathered here to have their meals. Lin Feng did not usually eat at the school cafeteria. He was chronically ill and did not have much appetite for normal food, let alone mess food from the school cafeteria. However, he was very hungry today. He felt much better with the smell from the cafeteria. Lin Feng looked at the dazzling array of food in the cafeteria. He knew that he needed to take in a lot of nutrients now, so he specially ordered some dire beast meat that was rich in nutrients. The portion for 3 or 4 people was served on the table. He did not stand on ceremony. Driven by hunger, he immediately started wolfing down the food. Lin Feng, you came to the cafeteria. Lin Feng was wolfing down the food in front of him when he heard a familiar voice. He looked up and realized that it was Chu Chen, who was revered as the goddess of the martial arts club.